All right. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Organic Guy podcast. I'm your host, the Organic Guy. This is your home of organic conversations where you get to hear from various personalities in the organic movement. And today, I am super excited to be joined by Mr. Lee Holstock, who is a senior business and trade development manager at the Soil Association. The Soil Association is the UK's biggest organic certifiers and played a really key role in founding the global organic movement. Mr. Lee, thank you very much for joining me in the podcast.
You're welcome. Really excited to be involved.
Nice. Yeah, from the look of things, I mean, seems like you've been heavily involved in the organic sector, especially you've been working with the Soil Association, I think, for over 20 years now. So you can give us a little bit of a context how you found yourself in the organic movement in the first place.
Yeah, of course. Well, it seems like a very long time ago now. I left university with a degree in environmental sciences, spent a little bit of time working in banking, and it was very clear to me from that point that this wasn't really for me. And I've always really believed in this idea that the commercial world, business world, has an important role to play in mitigating loss of biodiversity and damage to the environment. And I recall studying back in 1995, a case study of a pharmaceutical company called Merck, who worked with a Costa Rican rainforest authority called the Merck InBio Agreement, where the rainforest was essentially a drug company were paying for the protection of the rainforest so that the rainforest could continue to yield samples for development of new pharmaceuticals. And I remember thinking that's how it should work, this relationship or cooperation. So when I saw that the Soil Association were looking to recruit people, I very much saw that organization as a great example of a business that were trying to join the dots between the needs of consumers, reality to be byproducts, but also trying to as my ecology lecturer used to call it, softening the matrix, making that land that the product comes from more hospitable, less polluted. So I signed on the dotted line in a real hurry, and I've never looked back.
Yeah, I mean that's a nice touch as well to your history on how you joined the movement. So, and then there's no doubt that the United Kingdom has played a really important role, especially during the early years of the organic movement. So we have, personally, I've read about Sir Albert Howard and his influence to the start of the organic movement. And also was seeing how Eve Bulford also played a huge role, especially also in establishing the Soil Association. So from your perspective, growing up, was organic something that was being talked a lot in Great Britain or in the United Kingdom as well? And you can sort of give us an overview of how you've seen the history of the organic movement develop from the 1930s, the founders trying to bring it up, and where we are at the moment.
Yeah, of course. And I'm always fascinated that our founders referred to organic as closed farming. The word organic didn't really appear, I guess, until the 1960s, 70s. But originally, the concept was about closing the loop around that farm, making sure that you could be self-sufficient. You wouldn't have to rely on external inputs. And I think the interesting thing about our founders were the parallels I see in with them and some of the founders of some of our very strongest organic brands now in the UK. And interestingly, this common kind of origin is that a lot of these people were travelers. They were thinkers and travelers. They traveled around the world. And I think of McCarrison, who was, in particular, was somebody who traveled to look at agricultural systems with a very, imperial head on initially. The idea was that he was going to take, new agricultural ideas to developing countries and show them how to farm in the modern way. And the interesting thing is, like so many other people that were involved in the early formation of the Soil Association, the outcome was actually the other way around. They learned far more from these farmers than they could teach them, and particularly this connection between those farming communities who really looked after their soil, who would, really made a kind of a point of caring for the soil. It was noticed that there was a definite increase in the health of the people in those communities. So we started to see this common observation that was made independently by different founders of the movement, that there is a link here, and hence Lady Eve Balfour and Albert Howard's idea that healthy soil should ultimately lead to healthy plants, healthy animals, and healthy people. So that was really where it came from. And again, I've met a number of brand founders in organic, whether it's the 1960s, 70s, 80s, who themselves have had their eyes opened by travel, whether it's going to somewhere where the food and the healthcare is unfamiliar. It's a different approach, and they've got very ill, and they found that food is one of the most effective medicines that you can rely on, or whether again their experience was directly in seeing the amazing results from farming in a manner that doesn't rely on agrochemicals or the big global agrochemical industry. So I think that was that's quite an interesting kind of link between our founders and some of the people who've come into the movement. And for me, going through the 1980s, 1990s, when I was young, I think probably organic was still pretty obscure in the UK. It was still a niche market. I suspect, like many, you had an awareness that there was something going on there. Maybe it was some hippies who were doing it. It felt very much like other sort of approaches, which are still incredibly important, valid, that you still hear about these days, like macrobiotics and stuff like this, but very niche. But I think really, at the point where I started to get involved and join the Soil Association, that was the real point where organic was turning the corner. And in the first few years I worked at the Soil Association, we were emerging from being a fairly sort of small organisation to suddenly one that everybody wanted to play with and everyone wanted to talk to. So it was a really, really exciting period, the early noughties in particular.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine in that period. And I was just wondering, I mean, when you're seated, maybe, different organizations, the organic movement especially, I mean, you do meet some of these brands. Do you feel like you have that extra motivation sort of do well in the organic movement because you have such a rich history of founders of the organic movement in your area, so that you can sort of bear the torch in terms of how organic is supposed to be done and or how organic is doing generally?
I think that history, that foundation is really, really important. It keeps us focused on the reasons for organic, and the Soil Association is taken some of those principles and it's really applying it beyond organic now. So one of the things that leads our strategy currently as a wider organisation, because we're actually one of the lead FSC Forestry Stewardship Council certifiers. We certify an area of forest globally around the sides of the UK. We're very much involved in delivering not just organic but healthily, freshly prepared food to schools, hospitals, public sector. So our remit is getting bigger. It's becoming more generally around this idea of connecting the dots between the climate emergency, the need to protect nature, and the health of not just us directly as a result of what we eat, but the environment around us. So the climate, nature, health agenda is becoming important. We're in a hurry here. We've got 10 years to do some radical stuff. So we can't just talk within the organic bubble. We have to speak more broadly outside that. And if you're a farmer that wants to be 80% organic, 50% organic, we think organic will always be up there at the top as the leading edge approach. But we still want to talk to anyone who has something to add in that conversation about our food and farming systems, whether that's agroforestry, people who want to grow more trees on their land and benefit from horizontal and vertical crops, or whether they're actually interested in just bringing fresh, unprocessed food to their local community. There's lots of different ways that we can address climate, nature and health. But again, organic is a really, really, really well-established, important way to go about that.
I mean, I definitely agree. In terms of if we are going to succeed, of course, we have to form a broader coalition of people who sort of have similar values and similar beliefs, so that we can sort of expand that horizon as well. So let's talk about well-established market. I think the UK organic market right now is valued around £2 billion. And so I'm just wondering, when you compare with other European countries as well, it's not as up there as in I would expect, just from not looking really at the numbers. But yeah, when you look at countries like Germany, for example, France, Italy, are probably doing pretty well. So from your perspective, I mean, you're heavily involved in this market. Why do you think those numbers are where they are, and what do you look at the bigger picture when you look at those kind of numbers?
Sure. Yeah. And I've seen in the last 7 to 10 years, the UK slipping from being the fourth largest organic market globally by value to, I think we're now the 11th.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a sign of our lack of success, because we've seen almost entirely growth during that period. I think we've just seen more growth elsewhere.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's a complex picture. I think that out there in Europe, other European countries, there have been more cohesive, joined up plans around organic strategies, which have been very strongly government led. I'd look to countries like Denmark, for example, where they have they're the second highest per capita spenders on organic product in the world, after Switzerland. And they have this, as I say, very, very joined up kind of government-backed, government-supported strategy. But in the UK, unfortunately, we are a little bit more inclined politically to leave these things to the market. We have had some support, but it gives a leg up to a market if you do get that joined up, cohesive government support, particularly in terms of financial support for farmers who want to convert. And I think in countries such as France, where the Bio Ambition plan has seen 22 million euros invested in organic supply chains alone, recent years, just to try and give that a whole boost and lift it, because those governments in those nations recognize the broader contribution that organic can make in terms of ecosystem services and public good. And we're still really in the middle of that conversation in the UK, and there is certainly an ambition in the UK to improve the environmental footprint of farming. There are some contradictory policies that make us scratch our heads occasionally and wonder if that's if it's as joined up as it could be. But what we're not seeing is quite the level of very specific ambition in terms of supporting organic farmers specifically. So that's one of the factors, I think, that is a challenge. And again, in the UK, we're very strongly led by supermarkets. I think in the last 10 years, approximately 70% to 3/4 of all organic sales have gone through a small number of our large supermarkets. And their level of commitment, the ability to invest in it, their willingness to expand, is very much controls the organic market in the UK. I'm pleased to say, I think that they are stepping up to the plate increasingly on organic. Most of them, they really are now starting to see that it has to be firmly in their strategy, that consumers are becoming more planet centric, that organic is a shortcut for many to a healthier, sustainable product. So that is changing. But historically, it's been a limiter to growth in the other countries, for example, Germany and France, who've got much more of an independent retail market. In both those countries, more than 50% historically of organic has gone out through independent retailers. It's given them much more sort of flexibility and room to grow.
Okay, let's talk about a leg up in terms of your market. COVID, hit us last year, and I was reading. I was part of the presentation that you gave during BioFac, and in the report you saw, there was sort of an increase in sales during this COVID period. What are some of the other trends that you really observed during this period that were of interest to you and sort of were showing you something in the organic market during this period?
Yeah, I mean, I think the exciting news is that we've seen a year-on-year growth in single digit in organic in the UK. This last year in 2020, we saw 12.6% value growth. So that's the best year we've had, I think, in 50 years. And COVID is very much behind that. I think several factors. I think first of all, consumers becoming much more focused on their own personal health, taking responsibility for their own personal health. And again, we can't honestly, hand on heart, go out there and say that in all cases, organic products are always going to be healthier, are going to directly, the research has not been done. We would need decades of research with very, very focused in controlled groups. But what we do know is that organic food is different nutritionally. There's been research conducted that's been very thorough, which has shown that actually the product is different. But I think what's important is that there is that understanding amongst consumers that organic, for them does equate to health, and they want to take control of that. So more purchasing of what seem to be healthier products, I think, has helped us. Equally, more shopping online. UK has always been quite enthusiastic about online shopping, and of course COVID has propelled that. Historically, we have always been arguably reliant on online sales. The box scheme has grown significantly in the UK in the last decade, and in fact I think the very first box scheme in the UK going back 25-30 years ago was an initiative that the Soil Association were involved in with farmers at the time. So that's been our way historically to get organic product directly into the hands of consumers, when perhaps supermarkets in the past have not been quite so enthusiastic in the UK about ranging products as they've been in other countries. So we're blessed with a good deal of representation online and some options for consumers already. So of course, when online became much more of interest to consumers, organics really benefited from that. And again, the advantage of online is if you're thinking about sustainability, if you're thinking about reasons to purchase, online consumers can get much more information about what they're buying at the point of purchase, and that's critical for organic. If I think if I could take every consumer in the UK on one of our Soil Association Learning Day farm walks, take them around for the day with a farm manager and show them the difference and actually the enthusiasm and passion and the real change at ground level that the farmer themselves is witnessing, I'm pretty sure that we would be 10 times more organic sales every year. So I think information's really key. It's not always very easy to communicate what a whole system approach to farming is, where you're not just picking individual things like animal welfare or reducing pesticides, but you're doing it all at once to get balance. It's not easy to communicate, but when people and customers and consumers start to get some insight into that, it makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think this particular kind of trend is going to go past the COVID itself, for example, the increased purchase of organic, as you just mentioned, or these are probably trends that are going to wean off as people get out of the COVID situation?
I think there's two factors that are quite important there. I think general health of the UK economy. I think what we have seen in the past is that where there's been even the threat of an economic downturn can sometimes cause retailers to sort of view organic as a part of a wider premium approach. Now, I would argue that there's a very different reason for the premium in an organic product, and it's very much more justifiable, or certainly not that a premium is not always justifiable, but by that I mean you can explain it in terms of arguments like true cost, that the producer of that food isn't trying to hide the impacts of that. The product is washing its own face. So but unfortunately, it isn't always, that differentiation hasn't always been made historically. And in the past, retailers have said, people are not going to have the money in 3 months' time. We're in a downturn. We're going to clear this stuff off the shelves. And we certainly saw that in 2008, in the last global downturn. And that was, not good for organic.
Yeah.
We feel we're in a much stronger position now. We've got enough ranging out there. Enough habits have been formed on the part of consumers.
Yeah.
And also that's set against a backdrop of a much, much better understanding, thanks to Greta, thanks to Netflix documentaries like everything from Cowspiracy to the many others around that are drawing attention, particularly amongst younger consumers, to food and farming. All those things are really helping improve people's understanding. So I think that this time it's certainly going to stick a lot better than it has in the past, regardless of what happens with the economy.
Yeah, I certainly hope so too. I mean, the trends we are seeing in terms of now people can take their health seriously, even in the long term, because you never know what's going to happen. So I think that's something that might stick for, quite a long period of time. Talking of things that have already happened, Brexit did happen indeed. And there were some uncertainties if there was going to be a deal or not. That did happen. So you can maybe take us through what are some of the experiences you've had so far since the deal happened, and how have been businesses dealing with it? Have they coped with the deal so far? And what is the overall feel and energy around Brexit?
Yeah, I think Brexit has been an incredibly challenging time for the UK food and drink industry generally, and organic is no exception.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd argue that we have faced additional challenges. One of the advantages of having a regulatory framework around you in the way that we have in organic is that it means that businesses have to compete on a level playing field, that you can't simply sell your product as organic and not have gone to the efforts that others have, not to have opened yourself up to the same level of scrutiny, so the certification and inspection. So it's right that there is a regulatory protection, but equally that cage that protects you from the outside world is also your prison. So in some cases it's created some challenges, particularly where there is not a regulatory alignment with the EU. And Brexit has really brought those to the fore. So I think at the moment we're working really hard to overcome the challenges. There have certainly been additional certification requirements now for movement of goods from GB into Europe. We've had a long historic and very healthy trading relationship with Europe, where we in the UK buy a lot of raw materials from European traders and wholesalers, and we also export a lot of finished product back to the EU. So but some of that business, we've gone through a period of uncertainty, I think it's fair to say, because there are some gaps in the trade and cooperation agreement. I think some gaps that weren't anticipated that we are now trying to work solutions around. Equally, we are sensing that, unfortunately, because of the additional workload paperwork that Brexit represents, then inevitably there are businesses within Europe who are maybe less inclined to trade with the UK now, and certainly we're sensing that sort of loss of goodwill in some quarters, which is really sad to see, and sad to see anything that would get in the way of our collective drive just to kind of improve food, improve farming, and do that together. So we're working on it, but there are still some challenges there.
It's sad to see. I mean, I can also see the struggle that maybe some business you're there, you're thinking, do I need to go through all this paperwork, all this kind of stuff to export my products, and what are some of the things I'm going to get? So that can be a tough decision for business to make, and certainly not a good side to see from an organic perspective, market sort of being reduced or not being available to some of the people who might want to access that particular market. Another area that I would like to get your feel or your observation so far on how people are reacting is, what is the conversation around regenerative right now? It's a very hot topic. People are talking a lot about it. what is your feel on the ground from organic farmers, for example, and organic practitioners? Are they sort of embracing the regenerative movement as a whole, or are they seeing it from a competition point of view, where maybe they might see it's probably going to take a share of the organic market? So how are you seeing this conversation going, especially right now?
Sure. I mean, it's very early days in the UK, and I think the important thing to reflect on is that where the regenerative agricultural movement originated, and in the US, regenerative organic has inevitably emerged because of a sort of sense that the federal framework for organic in the US is not strong enough. So there is a feeling that the national organic program standards in the US historically have been too focused on inputs, the what you shouldn't put into the farm, and less of a conversation around what you should be putting into the farm. I think in the UK and Europe we're in a slightly different position, because there has always been within our organic standards an element of the regenerative, whether that's restricting practices, whether it's encouraging other fertility building practices. I mean, we are already to a degree covering that, but equally, further to my original point around the broader church of sustainable food and farming, then there will be those farmers who maybe don't want to be completely organic, but they would like to buy into some of the either organic practices or regenerative practices, and we would really applaud that, because fundamentally your practices are changing so that you're a net accumulator of, for example, soil carbon, or biodiversity is expanding in your farm. Then however you achieve it, then great. We still would suggest that organic is the leading edge, because it tries to balance the whole system. And certainly over the many years I've worked in organic, I've seen individual parts of that system taken out, whether it's antibiotic-free certification or non-GMO verified. And this often begins in the US, where businesses see an opportunity to sell the product on one of those attributes. And I think that's all helping, it's all contributing, but I don't think there's any substitute for actually bringing all those together into one systematic approach. The only question is, can that move fast enough to solve the problems that we urgently need to solve? And I think a mixed approach will be necessary.
That's a very good perspective as well, to just note there's a difference between how the organic movement is in the European Union, especially in Europe, and the difference in the United States. Of course, the erosion of standards there causing a lot of different reactions to that. So I think that's also a very important point to mark as well. So in terms of challenges, we mentioned a little bit earlier about the total market not being as high as it should. From experience of all these years you've been in the organic movement, what are some of the challenges, like specific challenges you've seen the organic movement as have encountered in terms of trying to expand that market more to other consumers?
I think that the diversified routes to market is really important, and that includes export. We in the UK don't export as much organic food and drink as we do food and drink generally. So our own work has suggested it might be 19 to 20% of food and drink in the UK is exported. We think there might be half that percentage for organic. So there are opportunities there for UK companies to take their product further, and if that improves their overall sales volumes, the scale of economy, then that's great, because it helps them to do more organic business generally. I think equally, in the past, there's sort of restricted ranging in our main core retailers are sort of seeing organic as a sort of a nice to have rather than something that's really important and core to the offer. I'm really pleased to see that is changing significantly. And I think really one of the biggest barriers that arguably we still face is that it's a complex message, organic, to understand why you as a consumer, if you're short on time, you're busy, you want to understand how picking up that particular product is a positive choice, and you want to understand that quickly. The complex message of, again, how the system of agriculture on balance is a better approach, how that relates to you personally, and then of course you enter into conversations there about cost. Organic food is inevitably, because it doesn't attempt to hide the cost of its impacts on the world, whether that's carbon, whether that's pollution, it can't compete on shelf with a product that hides those costs and pushes them elsewhere. So there is a very heated conversation that's gone on for some years in the UK around the cost of organic and how accessible that is to people on lower incomes. And I think that's one of the real anxieties and challenges for the organic movement, that we feel good food is a right, not a privilege, that everyone should have access to that. So we can't subsidize the food that's on the shelf. We can't bring the price of that down. We can only appeal to consumers to look at their priorities. Food is important, and if they possibly afford to spend more, then buying the right products, we would encourage them to do that. But equally, for those that don't have the freedom of that choice, then we can help in other ways, and that's one of the big drivers for our really successful and important Food for Life a partnership that we've led for over 10 years now, which has resulted in literally millions of meals every single working day going into schools, hospitals, and other settings where we know it's really important for organic to be one of the solutions, but also fundamentally for that food to be freshly prepared, for it not to have the nasty additives, and to make sure that particularly in less areas where people are less privileged, less wealthy, that these meals may be the only meal that child is getting that day. So we have other ways to address this food poverty, food inequality. It isn't just through organic, but where people can afford organic, we still think the price is very much justified. So I think that, and the complex message around trust, integrity, sustainability, health, all those things are ongoing challenges for organic. But I think, as we mentioned earlier, the way people buy organic, the way that they get their information around their choices is changing. The general awareness of how food and farming and the environment all fit together is growing. So I think that's really positive for organic moving forward.
All right. Before I let you go, I would like to get a bit of prediction from you. I mean, when you look at the organic sector right now, especially in the United Kingdom, where do you see it, let's say 5 to 10 years from now? And what are some of the areas, when you look from an organic perspective, that gets you excited?
Wow. Well, I think at the moment, I think there's I can only really speak about it from a sort of market and certification perspective. I think from a market perspective, we've got plenty more ceiling for growth. I mean, in the UK at the moment, as great as growth has been in organic food and drink, we're still under 2% of all food and drink. So we've got a long way to go in terms of, winning the trust of new consumers, getting them to try organic products. And I'm confident that many consumers would not turn back once they've tried some of the fantastic products that are out there. And indeed, many people historically who are quite loyal to organic see our symbol there over my shoulder as a shortcut to a quality mark, because their experience of the products is so very often so positive. So we've got to get people to try products and understand the basics, and I think we've got a lot of movement there. I think in terms of certification, it's really interesting. I think we set up the certification subsidiary, Salt Association certification at Salt Association back in 1973 when I was still a twinkle in someone's eye, so that is a very, very long time ago. And one of the reasons for setting standards and creating certification was not just to protect our market, but also it was really about compensating for the anonymity in our food supply chains. You and I cannot walk into factories, big factories, there are rules, there is biosecurity, and understandably so. But we can't do that. So certification in many ways is we're the eyes and ears of the consumer, and that's why we propose our symbol as a symbol of trust. But equally, and we're independent, and we are a not-for-profit, and that's really important. But in the future, I think information technology is advancing so fast that there's a great deal of scope for more transparency for consumers to virtually visit places to get more information about the supply chain, and importantly, where their product has come from and how that's affected the people that grow that product and the environment in that area. And if we can show this information in a robust and credible and trustworthy way, then maybe the role of certifiers will change. And I think maybe it won't, but it's certainly an area I personally find really interesting, the whole issue of how traceability, transparency and trust will change with technology.
All right, Mr. Lee, thank you very much for creating time to join me in this particular podcast. For me, it was such an absolute pleasure. I had a lot of insights that I didn't have before these conversations on how the organic movement is in Great Britain and what is the feel around the organic movement, its market so far. So for me, it was such an interesting conversation. I'm sure a lot of the listeners will find this conversation helpful too moving forward.
My pleasure. Thank you for including me. I've really enjoyed talking to you this afternoon. So thanks again.